I want to start in Matthew. And so if you want to join me, just turn to the very, very end of the book of Matthew. And what I want to do is I want to start off with the decision point that I want to call on us to make. Look at the very, very end of the book of Matthew, and just, I remember hearing this old story. I think it was a Buddhist or a Hindu who sat and he read through the four Gospels, and somebody asked him, they're like, what do you think? And he goes, oh, that was great. He was like, that guy's amazing. And he's like, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, I mean, he reached nirvana after only 4 reincarnations. I mean, it was like, look at this. Jesus lived 4 different lives, and then he finally reached ascendancy. And it's like, that's not what this is. We understand this. The Gospels are 4 different accounts of the exact same story. All right? There's debate, there's argument back and forth on which was written first, and honestly, none of those debates really, really matter. But again, you've got 4 different accounts, and we right now have been focusing all of our attention on the book of Mark. That's the one we really, really zoomed in on. Every now and then we wander out, but you might notice I'm trying to limit as much as possible wandering over to cross-references, because I have taken enough time in the book of Mark. You do not want me cross-referencing every single time Mark talks about someone else. All right? But what's really cool is each gospel is going to have a slightly different focus. Each gospel is going to have a slightly different way of telling it. And I like the way Mark is, because Mark is just down and dirty and fast. And I mean, it's just, you're ripping through this account and you're going, hold on. I need to catch my breath. And it's like, nope, we got to get to this next thing. If you go to the other Gospels, they're going to kind of stop and expound on things. And Matthew is going to pull out a family tree and be like, did you know? And start expand. And I think that's why Mark appeals to us, because we just just get to the point. And Mark just really has that gritty, let's just write it all down. And then he did, and then he did, and then he did, and then he did, and then he did. And I just want to start kind of pulling back a little bit and watching the connections here. So we're here in Matthew, and obviously Matthew's written to a very Jewish audience. We understand that. Mark has some of these aspects that we've been digging into over the last few weeks where Jesus is kind of dismantling the Jewish worship system and saying this is not going to be a thing anymore. Like the temple's coming down. Remember the whole fig tree illustration? And he talked about that mountain will be removed, and he's looking at the Temple Mount as he talked about that. He's bringing up all these things and basically saying this is no longer going to be where you go to worship me. This is no longer going to be the place that you guys all have to come to. And you saw hints of that with the Samaritan woman who's sitting there at the well, and she's like, so where do we worship? And he goes, there's coming a day where those that worship me are going to worship me in spirit and truth. And it doesn't matter, I'm at this mountain, I'm at that mountain. He's like, no, that mountain's going to be removed. And so, again, God's not done with Israel. We talked about that a long time ago, and Lord willing, we'll get to come back and kind of talk through how we approach that topic. But God has now shifted the responsibility from Israel to us as a church, and he's saying, I've got some requirements for you guys. And right here at the end of Matthew is where he kind of finalizes that switch. And so what's happened in this point in Matthew, the crucifixion has happened. Jesus has risen from the dead. He spent 40 days traveling around with his disciples, and now he is about to ascend back into heaven. And so he's leaving them with one final word of caution, one final word of encouragement. And really what it is it's, parents, you might do this tomorrow when you send your kids to camp. If you were anything like my parents growing up, when I was sent off to camp, they would look at me and they'd say, remember who you represent. And they not literally pointing that finger at my chest, but it would be that idea of you represent our church, and you represent our family, and you represent yourself, and what is it? It's all this idea of hey, I'm not going to be around to swat you upside the back of the head when you're doing something dumb. You got to swat yourself upside the back of your head when you're doing something dumb. And it's that idea of Jesus is going back into heaven, and he's more or less looking at his disciples and saying, guys, remember who you represent. Keep on task. Remember what your mission is. All right, I've got to bring out an escape room illustration just one time during this sermon. I have an hourglass. It's probably not a real hourglass. I'm not going to try it because I don't want you guys watching it the whole time. But one of the things we would do in an escape room is we'd start a timer. And you'd have that timer that would be running the whole time. And it would be counting down from an hour, and we would let you know, guys, we've only got 45 minutes left. Guys, we've only got 40 minutes left. Guys, we've got a half hour left. And I remember doing one room with Rocky way back in the day, and we were solving this puzzle, and we were looking at the time, we're like, we got plenty of time. And we solved this room, and we opened the door, and there's another room. And we're going, okay, we got this. Like, we've never lost an escape room together before. We're not going to start now. And so we get into that room, and we're like, okay, we got like 20 minutes left. We just have to finish this room. Like, that room took a long time. Okay, we got this. And then we finish that room up, and we're like, okay, we got a little bit of extra time, and we open, and there's another room. And we're just going, oh, no. Like, and we keep looking at the clock, and like, we're trying to do it without hints, but it got to the point where we're like, yeah, forget this. We're winning this room. We're taking all the hints we can do. And like, but what was it? We had that timer clicking down, and we knew, I can't waste a whole lot of time on this puzzle anymore. I need to hurry up, and we need, like, yeah, like if we had like 10 hours in this room, we could be examining all the wiring and having fun with everything. No, we got an hour. We need to go, and we need to go fast. And I'm telling you, when you watch someone else play an escape room, it is torment, because you're watching them going, just do the thing. Just do the thing. You're running out of time. Do the thing. And you get a little bit nervous. But I want you to imagine if I dropped you in a room and I didn't give you a timer and I said, you have a certain amount of time to get the job done. Some of you would be really nervous and you would very quickly get the job done. And then you stand around going, what else do I need to do? Others might linger and lollygag and fool around a little bit. And then if I whispered, you got 10 minutes. But that's where an hourglass is really nice, because you can watch this and you can slowly see it drain. But what if you didn't know when I was considering that hourglass timed out? Now, all of us know when all of this ends up down here, the hourglass is timed out. But what if I was looking at that going, that's not the measurement I'm measuring? What if it's half and half? That's when you're done. Quarter and 3/4, that's when you're done. What would that change about how you acted? What would that change about how you behaved if you did not know when the timer was expired? You didn't know when that timer was finished. You only had so much time. You had a mission you had to accomplish, but you did not know how much time you had left. And that's where Jesus, in this final message to his disciples, says, guys, you do not know how much time you have left. Honestly, it does not matter how much time you have left. That's the whole point he's getting at here in Mark. But I want to start with the challenge at the end of Matthew, the final message he sends before he sends them out into the world. And he says, you've got an hourglass. You have no idea how much time's going on that one. You don't know when it starts. You don't know when it ends. Keep the hourglass in mind, but again, only use it to keep an urgency. And look at the end of Matthew here, because Matthew chapter 28, and I want you to see this because Jesus is talking to them. Verse 9, and they went and told his disciples, saying, Jesus met them and said, all hail. And they came and they grabbed him by the feet and they worshiped him. So right off the bat, we understand our job ultimately is to worship Christ. There's so many other things we could talk about, so many other things we could do. We could have arguments about this or that or the other thing. But the fact is, we need to worship Christ. And Jesus says, if you love me, you're going to keep my commandments. So you look through the scriptures, you find out what Christ commands, you keep those commandments. You worship him. You treat him like God because he is. And so that's the first thing they do. Right off the bat is they worship him. And I ask you this simple question. Are you worshiping Christ? Are you serving him? Is he your God? Is he the one who gets to call the shots? And look what he says right off the bat. He says, they worshiped him, and Jesus says this, be not afraid, go and tell my brethren that go into Galilee, and there they shall see me. Okay? So they meet at this place. And then when they're going, behold, some of the watch came into the city and showed unto the chief priests all the things that were done. And when they assembled with the elders and they had taken counsel, they gave large money to the soldiers, saying, say ye, his disciples came by night and stole him away while he slept. And if this come into the governor's ears, we will persuade him and secure you. And they took money and they did as they were taught, and the saying is commonly reported amongst the Jews to this day. Okay? So the first thing we need to remember is we need to be worshiping Christ. We need to make sure he is our focus. We make sure we focus and worship him properly. Second, we understand, as we kind of wrap this story up, that there are going to be people who lie. The Bible says that people will be deceiving and being deceived. And sometimes those are the same people. Sometimes the very people who have been thoroughly deceived are the ones that believe it and go on and deceive others because they truly believe it. And so as we give out the gospel, as we deal with people, we're running into people who genuinely believe what they believe. They're not stupid. They might not even think that they're being a liar. They may completely be convinced of what they believe. And we deal with them with patience. One of the aspects of the title pastor that I love, I don't use the title too much like you know, but the title deals with the idea of a shepherd. And the shepherd is someone who leads people along. And if you've ever dealt or ever seen a shepherd, he's having to herd sheep. And again, there are people who you witness to. There are people that you're ministering to. There are people that you're talking to. And the Bible compares every single one of us to a sheep. It says, all we like sheep have gone astray. We've turned everyone to his own way. And so as you minister with people, there are going to be aspects of that person's personality that are sheep-like, and they need to be shepherded along. And that's not an insult. That's just how we are. When you raise children, when you work with students, when you deal with a new person at work, guess what? You are acting like a shepherd and bringing that person along. They're going to make stupid mistakes. You know why? Because they don't know any better. And that's where, as we study wisdom on Sunday nights, we've been dealing with the difference between a simpleton and a scorner and a fool. And we said there's different ways to approach each of these people. And in this case, you've got a group that is intentionally lying about Christ, intentionally lying about the story, intentionally twisting the facts. You don't even regard those things. You just keep pushing forward on the mission. You ignore the lies. But then we get to the real challenge and look at the next passage here. It says, so they took money, they did as they were taught, and the sayings commonly reported unto the Jews unto this day. It says, then the 11 disciples went away into Galilee, unto the mountain where Jesus has appointed them. So right off the bat, we see the worship. Right off the bat, we see the idea that I'm not listening to lies. But then, we just keep carrying on. I find it interesting that it points out that there were 11 disciples. You've got to know that there's an open wound as they limp their way up to that hillside, knowing the man who traveled with them for 3 years just stabbed them all in the back. Like, we've all been betrayed. We've all suffered, and Wednesday night we walk through that in the book of Hebrews, and we talk through some of the reasons why people fall away. So if you missed it, I would challenge you to go back over that. But Wednesday night we walked through and we said, here's the unbelief, the hypocrisy, the hurt, the whatever. There's all these reasons why people walk away from the faith, because there are people who act like people and who do people-y things, and yeah, it hurts. And there are times where people walk away. There's times where people betray us. There's times where people wrong us. Accidentally, intentionally, maliciously, ignorantly, whatever. It doesn't matter. The hurt's still the same. And in this case, they were suffering from a malicious attack. They were suffering from someone who stabbed them in the back, who had been robbing from them the whole time, and who tried to get and succeeded in getting Jesus killed. And so I just want you to understand, like, they could have just said, you know what, we're packing it up. And they did. They did at one point. But Jesus came and strengthened them, and they got back on their feet, and they kept going. And so you know it's got to be painful for these 11 disciples to go, who's next to stab me in the back? Like, who's next? What else is coming? Is that a light at the end of the tunnel, or am I on a train track? Like, what is going on? And you kind of get that nervousness. You're afraid to hope. You're afraid to put your trust in anyone, because it's like, well, I really don't like being a knife rack. And these 11 disciples did not let them stop them. They said, yeah, we 11 disciples, we are going up, and we are going to carry on the mission. Yeah, Judas, he betrayed us. You know what? Peter, so did you. You know what? All the rest of you, you all ran away too. And every single one of them has to get back up, seek repentance, and just keep pushing forward. But I want you to see the grace of God. And this is why he's worthy of worship. This is why he's worthy of following. Because even though all his disciples forsook him and fled, even though Judas stabbed him in the back, Jesus restores them to fellowship, and then look what he does. He hands the keys to them and says, guys, this is now in your hands. Like I want you to understand the importance of that. That God himself is saying, you do not deserve this, but I'm going to work through you anyway. You failed, you forsook, you did all of these things, but I'm still going to work through you. And so look what happens here in Matthew, again, the end of Matthew. And it says, and they worshiped, look at this, the 11 disciples, they went away into Galilee to the mountain where Jesus is appointed. So they've worshiped, okay? They've weathered the lies. Now, they limp their way to where Jesus is. And look at the types of people Jesus is commissioning. Look at verse 17. And when they saw him, they worshiped him. But look at those next words. But some doubted. what more evidence do they have to have? Again, think about like the ropes course illustration I've used. I dropped out of that tree 100 times on that rope. How many more times do I have to drop out of that tree on that rope before I trust that rope to actually hold me? Oh, well, 101, 102. No, just one more time. Think about all the things Christ did. Literally, he dies on the cross, he rises from the dead, he restores all of them to fellowship, and yet, look at this. Some of them are still there, the 11. They are still there doubting. I mean, if that's not an encouragement, I don't know what is. I mean, really, think about it. This is God himself sharing a story about his closest companions here on earth and saying, yep, they still doubted me. They still doubted. So what do we learn from this? Well, really simply, you're going to have doubts. You're going to have struggles. Every time God teaches you a new lesson, guess what? You're going to struggle. You're going to have to walk by faith. You're going to have to work through it. And you know what? God understands our doubts. I love that story where he looks at it and he says, all things are possible to those who believe. And the guy goes, I believe. And the next words are, help thou my unbelief. Why? Because he's a human. He understands the concept that we struggle with our faith. Especially if we've just been hurt. Especially if we're still bleeding from the last injury. We struggle with our faith, and he says, I know you're going to doubt. I know you're going to have a struggle, but you just get up and you keep forging ahead. And I love that. We just saw this in Mark where he's talking to the Sadducees. He says, you go astray. You err. He says, you don't know the Scripture, and you don't know the power of God. You know how you know the power of God? You know how you learn to trust your equipment? You learn to trust your equipment by using it. That's one of the things I learned on the ropes course. I was strapped into a multi-point harness holding a rope that could hold up several hundred pounds, if not 1,000 pounds. I did not weigh anything close to that. And I knew for a fact, mentally, this thing could hold me. But it wasn't until I decided, you know what? I'm going to put my full weight on this rope and let this rope actually do its job. The rope would always do its job. The rope would have always held me. But I got to experience the joy of dramatic free fall without the sudden stop at the end because I trusted my equipment. I got to make my own rope swing, and I got to swing back and forth from trees looking like a complete moron. But it was fun because I trusted my equipment, and I said, you know what? I can do this because I know how to do it safely. Cool? There are people who never leave the ground. They never let their feet leave the ground because they're too scared. They don't trust. Spiritually speaking, we need to trust our equipment. No matter what the doubt is, no matter what the struggle is, no matter what the fear is, I want us to understand we need to trust our equipment and we need to step out in faith and let God do his thing. Let God provide for us. Let God take care of us. And God, I think, has forced us as a church to do that on multiple occasions, even the last year, where he says, I'm kicking you out of the nest. You don't have a choice. And I'm thankful for that. I'm unbelievably thankful for him backing us into a corner again and again and again and saying, you're going to trust me whether you like it or not. And I would challenge you in your personal life, as it comes to church, step out and trust your equipment. And so that's what you see. There were some that doubted. And so let's review. First of all, they worship him. Are you worshiping Christ? When you find out about lies that are being said, don't let them stumble you. When the betrayal hits, don't let it stumble you. When the doubts hit, don't let it stumble you. And it's all grounded in the worship. It's all grounded in the worship of Christ. But then, I think the other grab point is going to be our mission. The worship is going to give us one point of contact. The mission is going to give us our other. And look what Jesus says to them in verse 18. And Jesus spake unto them, and he says this, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Think about that. Think about that. All power is mine. Nothing can touch me. Nothing can resist me. Nothing can fight me. All power is given to me. Who are you going to side with? I mean, who are you going to side with? The guy with the rocket launcher or the guy with the stick? I mean, really, like if you had a choice of which guy you were going to have in your corner in a war, rocket launcher or stick? And you're like, well, I don't know. It depends. Is it close combat or long range? Okay, come on. Don't be that silly. That's my job. But think about that. You think about the firepower that a rocket launcher would bring you. Jesus looks at this and he goes, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. You don't like the rocket launcher? Fine, I'll call in an airstrike. You don't like that? I'll call in a mortar. You don't like that? Okay, I'll do football-sized nuke. Okay, like, what more power do I need? No, I think I'm going to side with the guy with a stick over here. It's a pointy stick. It's a stick that's worked for a few things throughout history, so I think I should go with the pointy stick. When the disciples all forsook Christ at the crucifixion, they were siding with the guy with the pointy stick going, I just don't think I can trust him. That's what they were doing. They were going on their own wisdom. They were going on their own intellect. They were going on saving their own skins. And Jesus says, you don't get ahead that way. That's not how you worship me. That's not how you serve me. But they went, things are getting rough. We better get out of here. And so what Jesus is doing is he's saying, I want you to remember that I have all the power. So when you're worshiping me, you're worshiping someone who is safe to worship. When you're serving me, it's someone who's safe to serve. When you choose to sacrifice for me, it is someone who it's safe to sacrifice for. I'm not going to leave you hanging. When I learned how to belay myself down out of that tree, it made it really easy because I no longer had to sit up there waiting for someone to come rescue me. Literally, I was up in a tree one time for an hour because the guy who got me up there had to go on a mission. So he left, and I sat up inside that tree for an hour, watching the trees sway, going, man, I really wish I had some other way to get down out of this tree. And then the ants found me. And so one by one, I'm flicking the ants off of the platform. I felt like I was the big boss in a video game with all the little guys running at him. I was just like, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead. And for an hour, I'm sitting up in this tree just flicking ants off of myself, going, I really wish someone would come back and save me. When God says, I have all power, he's not going to leave us in a lurch and go, oops, I forgot about you. Sorry about that. When we choose to sit up in a tree for Christ, so to speak, we know he's not leaving us there because he forgot us. And so we start with the worship. We start with the, you are more valuable than anything. We put him first. And then as we start hearing the lies and the doubts and the struggles, we put those in their proper place. We put those as the guy with a pointy stick, and we side with the guy with the rocket launcher and say, you know what, I'm going to side with him because he has all power. And all of this has just been simply to reorient our thinking. Because when God asks us to go on a mission, when God asks us to do a task, it sometimes requires hard work. And that hard work is discouraging and it's disheartening. And just like this, we don't know when our time is expired. And so sometimes it is just a simple matter of waiting. And when we thought the job was over, he goes, actually, there's a little bit of sand left there. Oh, I'm just kidding. We're going to start that all over. And you're going, no. That's not how I was only bracing my endurance for one roll of this. I wasn't bracing for two. And so I want us to see how the whole first half of this has just been recalibrating our thinking. And then Jesus says, here's your job. Here's the mission I have for you. Here's the decision that we need to make. Once we've decided to worship him, once we've decided to push through the doubts and the discouragement and the betrayal and all of that, once we've decided to say he actually has the power that he says he does, we then say, I'm going to trust my equipment enough to put my weight fully in it, and here's how I do that. Verse 19, go. The first challenge he gives to us is to simply go. But you notice, he says, go ye therefore. Okay? In this church, I don't think I need to start with the, what's the therefore? We understand this. But go back and re-preach the whole first part of this sermon because he says, go therefore. Because all power has been given to me. Because I'm worthy of worship. Because you don't need to believe the lies. Because yes, you're going to be betrayed and discouraged and frustrated. Don't worry about that. Worry about the fact that I have the power to sustain you, and go. Just step out. Go do the job. And sometimes you do not know what you're capable of with God's help until you just do it. You just step out and serve. That's how I learned to song lead. That's how I learned to preach. That's how I learned to soul win. That's how I learned to do anything that I've done, including being a pastor. God just kicks you in and he goes, go learn it. And you come back and you say, God has a mission for me. God has provision for me. God has a job for me to do, and he's going to be there every step of the way, so I might as well just keep going. Go ye therefore. And what do we go and do? Well, like I said, there's times where we have to act like a shepherd and we have to lead people along. And he says there, go therefore, teach all nations. Now what's beautiful about where we live in California, all the nations come to us. All right, so we don't even have to go out. But if God led you to go out, go out. But what's awesome is you can say, I'm going to go to this park, and I'm meeting people from Pakistan and Afghanistan and Stanistan. I'm meeting people from all the stands. I haven't met Uzbekistan, but anyway. But what do? You go to this park, and you're like, hey, I'm going to go to this international cuisine right now, and I will sit and learn about this culture. And then you go to this park over here, and you're going, that is a very different culture. But I can go to all nations without leaving our, few square miles from this place. And he says, go to all nations. You're going to run into different cultures. You're going to run into different ways of doing things. But here's what you need to do. You need to teach them in the name, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost. You make sure they're worshiping the right God. I love how he puts that. We're in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. You want to know a great litmus test that will eliminate most religions right off the bat is they don't believe in the Trinity, and this right there. It's like, hey, you believe in the Trinity? Nope. All right, you're one of the people that I need to get baptized, so let's talk. And so what do? You start teaching them. It says, so once you teach them, obviously they get saved at some point, you baptize them. And then here's what you do, verse 20. You teach them to observe what? All things whatsoever I have commanded you. Well, how can you teach what you don't know? Well, you learn it. You study the Scriptures. You properly divide the Scriptures. You work your way through it. And it says this, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever are commanded you. And then he reminds them one more time. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the world. And the idea here with the end of the world, it's kind of the idea of the ages, like the end of this time, where I'm going to be with you forever. I'm here with you. You don't have to worry about ever moving. The hourglass drained. I'm not with you anymore. Oh, you moved too far away from me. I'm not with you anymore. He says, all power has been given to me. Where? Heaven and earth. Lo, I am with you everywhere you go. So guess what? Just go. Now, as we wrap this up, let's actually get to the text. And you go, there is no possible way in the last 5 minutes that you're going to preach an entire sermon out of Mark after just giving the application to the sermon. You doubt me. Mark 12 says the same thing. I gave you Matthew, so you can go back to Matthew and you can see what we call the Great Commission. And the Great Commission works because Christ says, stop worrying and go. Stop stressing, stop fearing, stop doubting, and go. Like that's what he's trying to get them to do. He's talking to a bunch of scared disciples and telling them simply to go. And if you look at Mark chapter 13, what is he doing here? He's talking to a bunch of scared disciples who are worried about the end of the world, and he's saying, don't worry about that, just go. I mean, that really is what's going on here in Mark chapter 13. We just came off of him looking at the temple and saying, this is all going to get torn down. He just looked at the poor widow who's being taken advantage of, and he's basically saying, religious leaders, you're going to answer for that. And so Jesus is very upset. He's very disturbed by what he sees going on in the name of God. And so look at Mark chapter 13. And as they went out of the temple, one of the disciples saith to him, Master, what manner of stones and buildings are these? This is a pretty place. Okay, it would be like if you traveled to Las Vegas right now and you started wandering the streets, you'd see some really cool architecture. You might marvel at the architecture and go, look at how beautiful these buildings are. But someone who knew what was going on inside of those buildings might go, tear it all down. Like that's the idea. Jesus and his disciples are walking through the temple district, as you will, looking at the beautiful temple with all of its glory that has been built on the backs of these widows and taking advantage of people. And Jesus is ticked and he goes, it's all coming down. And when it all comes down, I want you to understand that I told you beforehand. So that way you're not shocked. And he tells them this so that they trust him. But look what he says. He says, seest thou the great buildings? There shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And so Jesus says, you know that doesn't happen peacefully, right? Like, it's an earthquake, or it's a bomb, or it's a trebuchet rolling up outside your city, or it's just guys tearing them down brick by brick. Nothing about tearing down a building is peaceful. So I'm just warning you, this is about to get bad. So you can imagine how troublesome this would be. And so they asked, verse 3, and as he sat over on the Mount of Olives over against the temple, Peter and James and John and Andrew, they asked him privately, telling, what shall these things be, and what shall be the signs that these shall be fulfilled? We don't have time to get into all the prophecies here, but I want you to notice what Jesus is trying to do. Is he's trying to say, don't worry about it. Stay about your mission. Don't worry when you see all these bad things happening. I've been listening to, these radio stations that talk about the end of the world since I was a kid. And I remember sitting on the radio and they're like, oh, next year in Jerusalem, and hey, the rapture's coming next, like any time now. And I remember as a kid listening to these radio programs as they were like, I think we found the red heifer. I think that, they're getting the garments ready. That was 30 years ago. Like they were, it was the thing where it was like, oh, it's going to happen like in a year or two. Like this we're done. Like we might as well just check out now because, it's happening. Did you hear about the war? Did you hear about that big earthquake that hit such and such? And people do. Like people get really nervous. They're like, there was an earthquake in Bombagistan. That's a diverse place. There's never earthquakes in Bombagistan. That means the world's about to end. Did you hear about the bomb that landed in... Okay, I want you to see what Jesus literally says about that way of thinking. Okay, and if you've thought that way, I want you to carefully think about what Jesus literally says in this passage. Because look what it says. He says, take heed that no man deceive you. People are going to get you all riled up. They're going to get you all scared. Don't fall for it. You shall hear what? Many shall come in my name saying, I am the Christ, and deceive many. You got people who are like, I'm the Messiah. I've come. Hi, I know you've all been waiting for me. And he goes, don't fall for that. Oh, but I can do a miracle. Don't fall for that. And then he goes further, and this is where I think we as Baptists specifically have a weak point. Because we get overexcited. We get overexcited every time we hear about a war, every time we hear about an earthquake, every time we hear about something weird that happens. We automatically go into rapture prep mode, and we go, it's happening now. The alarms are going off. But I want you to see what Jesus says. He says, you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Have we lived that for the last 40 years? 60, 80, 100. Okay, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. What does he tell you to do? Be not troubled. Does he say freak out? Does he say brace yourself? No, he says, don't be troubled. You will hear wars, rumors of wars. Do not be troubled, for such things must needs be, but the time is what? Not yet. But it's a war. But it's a rumor of war. But this guy attacked that guy. And it's like, yeah, like every year through the history of our world, like we are constantly killing each other. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to say there are things that we get very, very excited about. You need to calm yourself and trust he knows the timetable. But then look where he goes further. He says, and nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom shall rise against kingdom. Oh, but an earthquake. There was an earthquake in Bombagistan, and there shall be earthquakes in diverse places, and there shall be famines, and there shall be troubles, and what? These are just the beginning of sorrows. And he's trying to set their mind at ease to say, you have a job to go do. Stop getting distracted by the chaos, because the chaos is always going to be here. Now, there will be the ultimate chaos that will finally herald in everything. But we don't stop going, is that the chaos? Is that the war? Is that the famine? He goes, no. Your job is to keep on task. Don't worry about these distractions. They're just distractions. Go help those people. But we don't freeze up like a deer in headlights. Look at verse 9. But take heed to yourselves. So don't worry about all these earthquakes and national conflicts. You better pay attention to your own spiritual walk, because they're going to deliver you to councils and to synagogues, and you shall be beaten, and you shall be brought before rulers and kings for my sakes for a testimony against them. And the gospel must first be published among all nations. And so look what he's doing. He's bringing it back to us and saying, you have a message, and you're going to be called to answer for it. So be ready. Know how to give an answer. Know how to testify. Know how to speak these words into a ruler's ears. And whether they listen or not, so be it. But take heed to yourself Don't worry about these nations. Don't worry about these earthquakes. You can't control those. And the gospel must first be published among all nations. And when they shall lead you and deliver you up, take no thought beforehand what you shall speak, neither do you premeditate. For whatsoever shall be given you in that hour, that speak ye. For it is not ye that speak, but the Holy Ghost. And then he comes back to that topic of betrayal. And he says, brother shall betray brother to death, and the father the son. And the children shall rise up against their parents and cause them to be put to death. It's not pleasant. It's not peaceful. It's not wonderful. He says, and you will be hated of all men for my name's sake. He that shall endure to the end shall be saved. And then he gets into, this is how you know when the end is about to come. And that's where verse 14 starts. And so what is Jesus doing? He is trying to simply set our mind at ease and say there's so many things we could worry about. There's so many things we could stress about. There's so many things that are going to unsettle us. There's so much chaos in the world. But your job is to make sure you're worshiping Christ properly. Your job is to make sure you're not letting anything distract you from the mission. And then your job, because all of that power and strength is given to him, your job simply is to go. So you don't worry about it. And sure, there is going to come a point where, oh, that was the one, and now everything changed. But that is not in our power, so we don't worry about it. We simply do the mission we need to do. And I know it's exciting, and I know it's fascinating, but again, we cannot allow anything to take us off the mission. So again, as we look here in Mark 13, we'll unpack a little bit more of that, Lord willing, next week as we continue. But again, you notice verse 14 is where he actually gets into the things we need to look for when the end time is coming. And I think a lot of times we get distracted with things that Christ has literally said, these are not the signs. And so again, stay on mission. And we do. But there's always more to do. Let's close in prayer.